The Coliseum thrummed like a living creature, its walls vibrating with the voices of thousands of alien throats. The sound pressed down on him, a suffocating tide of mockery and hunger for blood. Captain Mason Hayes, U.S. Army Special Forces, known once as a Green Beret, now reduced to a captive in a galaxy that barely acknowledged humanity's existence, stood alone in the center of the arena. The sand beneath his boots was coarse, littered with fragments of bone, darkened in patches where blood had soaked deep into the ground. He flexed his fingers, forcing his breathing to steady. Fear had no place here. Not now. The announcer's voice, guttural and resonant, rippled through hidden speakers in a language Mason had learned to partially understand during captivity. The message was clear enough. Entertainment. Death. Proof of alien superiority. Mason was to be the object lesson, another primitive brute sacrificed before the might of a species that ruled among the stars. He tightened his jaw, sweat and grit stinging his eyes, though his posture betrayed nothing. The gates at the far end rumbled open, and the creature who would be his executioner stepped into view. Nearly 9 feet tall, armored in overlapping plates that gleamed metallic blue beneath the lights. The Galactic Soldier carried himself with the swagger of one accustomed to adoration. His eyes burned with an unnatural brilliance, twin orbs that glowed like molten glass. Around his mouth curved a cruel smirk, a sneer sharpened by confidence and contempt. The crowd roared louder, calling the soldier's name, though Mason could not distinguish syllables from the tidal wave of sound. The alien strode forward, heavy steps leaving impressions in the sand. Mason noted every detail with the cold focus of training drilled into him years ago. The armor was thick across the chest, but left vulnerable gaps at the joints. The alien's right knee bent slightly more than the left, suggesting an old injury or a flaw in enhancement. His gauntlets were reinforced, meant for crushing. His weapon, if he had one, was absent. No blade, no blaster. This would be a spectacle of hands, of brute strength, of humiliation drawn out for a ravenous audience. Mason did not flinch. His mind replayed every lesson from training, every brutal field exercise, every moment of his years in uniform. Survival required composure. He reminded himself that no man was unbeatable, no matter how alien his physiology. The soldier loomed over him, stopping just a few feet away, the scent of metal and ozone rising from the armor. Then came the words, translated through an embedded amplifier that rendered them clear, mocking in their precision. Fragile creature, the alien rumbled. Kneel. Your kind was not made for war. The crowd erupted again, laughter echoing like crashing waves. Mason's lips tightened into a hard line. He raised his gaze, eyes locking onto the glowing spheres of his opponent. His voice, steady and low, cut through the noise. Don't hit me again. The alien tilted his head, taken aback for a fraction of a second before laughter spilled from his chest, a booming sound that vibrated the arena floor. He turned, gesturing toward the crowd as if to share the absurdity of the human's words. The spectators howled with amusement, slapping their limbs together, some stamping feet that shook the benches. The phrase became a joke before Mason's ears, repeated by dozens, then hundreds of alien throats. Mockery burned at the edges of his focus, but Mason did not let it consume him. He had faced taunts before, from enemy captors, from situations designed to break men stronger than him. He let the noise wash over him, anchored in the single truth that had carried him through years of warfare: discipline under pressure. The alien's laughter stopped abruptly, replaced by a cold sneer. He lashed out suddenly, a strike faster than something that massive should have managed. The gauntlet collided with Mason's chest, an iron fist slamming into his ribs with such force that he staggered back, air exploding from his lungs. Pain radiated through his side like liquid fire, his body crashing onto the sand. The taste of copper filled his mouth, and for an instant the edges of his vision blurred. The arena erupted in delirious cheers. The Galactic Soldier lifted his arms, basking in the adoration. Mason pressed a hand against the sand, grit cutting into his skin, and forced himself upright. He willed air back into his lungs, teeth clenched against the pain. The alien leaned over him, voice amplified once more. Pathetic, it mocked. One blow, and already you crawl. Mason dragged himself to his feet, spine straightening inch by inch. Blood slicked his lip, dripping down his chin. He spat crimson into the dirt and met the alien's gaze without flinching. His chest heaved, but his eyes held a steady fire. I told you, he said evenly, don't hit me again. The words did not tremble. They struck through the air like a blade, quiet enough that those closest leaned forward to hear. Confusion rippled through the crowd before laughter drowned it once more, though a few voices faltered at the human's unbroken stance. The alien snorted, unimpressed, yet a flicker of irritation shadowed the confidence in his eyes. He advanced, each step measured, savoring the moment. Mason's mind sharpened. Every muscle in his body ached, but the surge of adrenaline cut through fatigue. His eyes traced the alien's movements, cataloging rhythm, balance, vulnerabilities. The soldier swung again, a massive arc meant to crush bone and end the fight with spectacle. This time, Mason twisted, letting the strike pass close enough that the wind of it brushed his cheek. He dropped low, sand spraying as his boots dug in, and his hand brushed against the ground, seizing a fragment of broken stone hidden beneath the dirt. The alien's momentum carried him forward a fraction, just enough. Mason's jaw clenched as he coiled, preparing. The crowd leaned forward, sensing the human's shift, though most dismissed it as futile resistance. Mason's heart pounded, each beat a war drum, steady, certain. He felt the weight of every Green Beret who had stood before impossible odds, of every oath he had sworn to survive and fight, no matter the ground. He rose, eyes locked on his opponent, dust swirling between them like smoke from a battlefield fire. The alien sneered again, lifting his arms for another strike, still confident in his inevitable triumph. Mason's stance, though battered and bruised, radiated a calm defiance that unsettled the moment. The sound of the crowd faded for him, replaced by the rhythm of his breath, the beat of his pulse. His gaze never wavered. In that instant, the fight transformed. He was no longer prey, no longer a token for alien amusement. He was a soldier. The alien charged. Mason waited, and the Coliseum held its breath. The alien's charge shook the arena floor, each step pounding like a war drum, sand leaping from the ground in bursts. Mason braced himself, every muscle wound tight, ribs screaming with each breath. His mind was calm despite the storm closing in. Training drilled into bone, and sinew carried him through chaos, teaching him that survival belonged not to the strongest, but to the one who endured, adapted, and struck where the enemy least expected. The Galactic Soldier swung, a fist broad as a mallet and wrapped in armor that shimmered with faint energy. Mason pivoted, dust spraying, the blow grazing his shoulder instead of crushing his skull. The force still spun him half a step, but he recovered, stone shard in hand. With precision born from desperation, he slashed upward toward the joint in the alien's armor. Sparks erupted as the edge scraped against metal, biting enough to jolt the soldier backward. A ripple of surprise spread through the crowd, thousands of alien voices blending into a confused roar. The soldier sneered, towering posture stiffening. He had expected a quick collapse, a broken human writhing on the sand. Instead, his prey stood tall, weapon improvised yet effective. Mason wiped blood from his mouth with the back of his hand, chest heaving, eyes locked on his opponent with a steady fire. He understood the truth in that moment. This was not about strength. It was about belief. The alien believed in inevitability. Mason believed in survival. Only one faith would hold. The alien lunged again, faster now, movement sharper, driven by irritation. Mason rolled aside, the gauntlet slamming into the earth, throwing sand and grit into the air. Seizing the chance, he leapt forward, jamming the stone into the soft joint behind the alien's knee. A guttural roar escaped the giant's throat as his leg buckled. The crowd gasped collectively, voices clashing between disbelief and fury. Mason did not relent. He ducked under a sweeping backhand, letting it whistle past his skull, then drove his elbow into the alien's side where plates overlapped. The impact reverberated through his bones, pain lancing up his arm, but he felt the armor shift. Weakness. A door cracked open. The Galactic Soldier stumbled back, clutching at his leg, fury twisting his features. His glowing eyes flared brighter, blazing with rage. Mason stood firm, chest burning, lungs aching, but his gaze did not falter. Every step forward reminded him that he was not merely fighting for his life. He was fighting for the dignity of his species, for proof that humanity was not prey but predator. The alien advanced, reckless now, abandoning elegance for raw aggression. He swung wildly, each strike thunderous, sand exploding as fists struck ground inches from Mason. Mason wove between blows, footwork carrying him through narrow gaps. Sweat dripped down his temple, mingling with blood, but his movements grew sharper. He was reading the rhythm, studying the patterns, every mistake by the alien amplifying his advantage. He ducked low, sweeping his leg across the weakened knee, sending the alien stumbling forward. Seizing the moment, Mason vaulted onto his back, arms snaking around the thick neck, locking in chokehold. The alien thrashed, staggering, bellowing with fury as he tried to dislodge the human parasite clinging to him. Mason's grip tightened, forearm digging into vulnerable flesh. The crowd screamed, thousands of voices colliding in shock. The sight of a human overpowering one of their soldiers was an insult none had foreseen. The alien smashed himself backward into a wall, armor crashing against stone, pain exploding through Mason's spine. He gritted his teeth, refusing to release his hold. The world blurred at the edges, agony radiating down his body, but discipline held him steady. With a roar, the alien hurled himself backward again, and this time Mason let go, rolling away to avoid being crushed. He landed hard, coughing, ribs stabbing with fire but alive. He scrambled to his feet just as the alien staggered to one knee, eyes blazing with hatred, chest heaving. Blood, thick and black, trickled from beneath the plates of armor, dripping onto the sand in dark rivulets. Mason's heart pounded as he realized the giant was tiring. Training had taught him, endurance wins wars. The alien might be stronger, faster, armored, but he was not trained for suffering. Mason was. Pain was his language, his battlefield. He stepped forward, shoulders squared, voice raw yet steady. You should have listened. The alien roared, launching forward with renewed ferocity, but Mason anticipated the move. He sidestepped, driving a knee upward into the alien's abdomen, forcing air from its lungs. As the soldier bent reflexively, Mason hammered his fists into the side of its head, each strike fueled by rage and survival. The alien stumbled, crashing to the ground in a shower of dust. The arena fell into shocked silence, thousands of eyes fixed on the fallen warrior. Mason stood over him, chest heaving, sweat and blood streaking his body, every muscle trembling with exhaustion. He had turned the tide. Where moments ago the alien mocked, now he lay broken in the dirt. Mason dropped to one knee beside him, grabbing the alien by the torso, pinning him with surprising strength. He leaned close, his voice a low growl meant only for his opponent. Don't hit me again. The alien's glowing eyes widened, then flickered with disbelief. He clawed at the ground, but Mason's grip held him fast. The crowd erupted into chaos, some jeering, some crying out in rage, others watching in stunned silence. The spectacle had shifted beyond entertainment into something dangerous, an insult, a revelation. Mason pressed harder, forcing the alien's face into the sand. Blood pooled beneath, dark stains spreading across the arena floor. Dust swirled around them, caught in the heat of the lights, creating a haze that blurred the edges of vision. Mason's body screamed for rest, every nerve aflame, yet he refused to break. He had made a promise in his heart, not just to himself, but to every human back home who might one day learn of this night. Humanity would not kneel. The alien thrashed once more, but weaker now, breath ragged. Mason felt the strength bleeding out of him with each passing moment. He tightened his hold, jaw clenched, expression grim and unyielding. Around them, the crowd shifted uneasily, torn between their thirst for blood and the unease of witnessing a myth unravel. At last, the alien sagged, his movements slowing, his glow dimming. Mason shoved him down fully, one hand pressing against his back, pinning him like prey before a predator. The sand darkened further beneath the fallen body, blood mixing with dust. Mason rose slowly, dragging breath into battered lungs. He stood over his enemy, shoulders squared despite the ache, eyes burning with defiance. The silence that gripped the Coliseum was more powerful than any cheer. He had proven in that instant that humanity was not what they believed. Not weak, not fragile, not prey. He stared down at the alien, broken and struggling to rise, and the words came again, not shouted but spoken with the weight of conviction. "I told you." The soldier wheezed, disbelief etched into every movement. The crowd shifted, a wave of murmurs breaking through. Mason tightened his fists, his gaze never leaving his opponent. The fight was not finished, but the tide had turned. He had carved out into the hearts of thousands. And though his body trembled, his mind was steel. The next strike would be his. Mason stood above the fallen giant, chest heaving, body bruised and aching, but his resolve unshaken. The alien soldier wheezed, his glowing eyes flickering faintly as if the life inside them threatened to gutter out. The sand beneath his massive body darkened with blood, spreading in jagged pools that soaked into the arena floor. Around them, the Coliseum had grown quieter, the laughter and jeers replaced by an uneasy hum. What had begun as spectacle was shifting into something the audience had not expected: fear. The alien tried to rise, muscles straining, armor creaking as he planted one hand against the ground. Mason reacted instantly, dropping low, seizing the alien's waist with both hands, and heaving with every ounce of strength left in his battered body. The crowd gasped as the human warrior lifted the massive form from the ground and slammed it back into the sand. Dust erupted in clouds, blinding and choking, drifting upward like smoke from a battlefield. The alien let out a roar, but it ended in a ragged cough, black ichor spraying across the arena floor. Mason staggered but held his stance, leaning into the weight of the moment. He glared at the soldier beneath him, his voice low and harsh. "I warned you." His words carried no humor, no boast, only a soldier's conviction sharpened by pain and pride. The alien struggled, but Mason pressed his knee into its chest, pinning the warrior beneath him. The eyes that once glowed with arrogant confidence now dimmed further, their brilliance fading into a dull, lifeless hue. The crowd erupted, half in rage, half in disbelief. Some screamed for vengeance, their alien tongues twisting Mason's warning into mockery. Others whispered, voices uncertain, as though witnessing the shattering of a truth they had always accepted. The Galactic Soldier had been a symbol of superiority, a champion meant to demonstrate humanity's futility. Yet here he was, broken and helpless beneath a human who refused to kneel. Mason rose slowly, blood and sweat dripping from his body, sand clinging to his skin like ash. He grabbed the alien by the torso again, lifting him half upright, holding him aloft like a shattered banner. The crowd roared louder, some in awe, others in outrage, the sound shaking the very foundations of the Coliseum. Mason's face betrayed no triumph, only grim determination. He had not come here to entertain them. He had come here to survive. With a grunt, he hurled the alien back down, the impact sending another wave of dust spiraling. Blood pooled faster now, staining the sand a deep crimson mixed with the alien's dark ichor. The lifeless eyes stared blankly toward the ceiling, glowing embers extinguished. For a heartbeat, the entire arena fell into silence. Thousands of voices caught in their throats. Mason stood alone, battered and bloodied, but unbroken. His chest rose and fell with the weight of exhaustion, yet his posture radiated defiance. He turned slowly, scanning the sea of alien faces that filled the stands. Some sneered with hatred, others watched with wide, fearful eyes, and a few leaned forward with something that looked almost like respect. He had done more than defeat an opponent. He had planted doubt. Above the arena, In a private gallery overlooking the fight, alien commanders shifted uneasily. Their armored forms glinted under the artificial light, voices murmuring in hushed tones. They had seen humans as a curiosity, a primitive species fit only for ridicule and subjugation. But now a single soldier had stood against one of their finest and prevailed. The image was dangerous. Symbols of weakness could be laughed away. Symbols of defiance could inspire rebellion. Mason ignored their presence. His world was the sand beneath his feet, the blood on his hands, the ache in his bones. He knew the fight was far from over. One victory would not grant him freedom. But victories were built one at a time, and he had seized this one with everything he had left. The crowd began to shift again, the silence breaking into divided chaos. Some demanded more blood, shouting for new challengers to restore the honor of their fallen champion. Others remained still, caught in the gravity of what they had witnessed. Mason spat into the dirt, wiping grime from his face with the back of his hand. His voice, ragged but strong, carried into the air. "Send the next one." The words rippled through the Coliseum like a shockwave. They were not a boast, not a plea, but a challenge. His tone was steady, his eyes hard, daring them to test him again. For the first time since he had been dragged into this alien prison, Mason felt the weight of control shift. He was no longer merely reacting. He was dictating. The alien body at his feet twitched once, then went still, blood spreading wider across the sand. Mason looked down at it, not with hatred, but with a grim soldier's recognition. An enemy defeated was still an enemy, but dignity demanded acknowledgement. He gave a curt nod, then turned his back on it, facing the arena walls where the next gate waited to open. The crowd's voices swelled again, a storm of anger and disbelief, their chants clashing in a chaotic rhythm. Mason closed his eyes briefly, drawing in breath through cracked lips, his lungs burning with every inhale. He remembered the long nights of training, the words of instructors who had hammered into him that exhaustion was only weakness leaving the body. He had endured worse than this. He would endure again. A rumble echoed through the arena as the far gate began to rise. Shadows stretched across the sand, and the sound of armored footsteps reverberated from beyond. Mason straightened, pain screaming through his ribs, but his stance remained firm. The first fight had proven what he was capable of. The next would test how much further he could go. Dust drifted lazily through the air, carrying the stench of blood and sweat. Mason's eyes locked on the darkness beyond the gate, his jaw tightening. The memory of the alien's mocking laughter replayed in his head, but now it was silent. The crowd had laughed too, once, but silence had choked them when the truth became undeniable. Humanity was not to be mocked. Humanity was to be feared. He clenched his fists, knuckles raw and bleeding, and took a single step toward the gate. The Coliseum seemed to lean with him, anticipation and dread thick in the air. He had survived this far, and he would fight until no strength remained. For every alien who doubted, for every commander who sneered, Mason's defiance was the answer. The arena floor still quivered with the echo of his last words. "Send the next one." The gate groaned upward, metal grinding against stone, and a flood of harsh light spilled into the arena. Mason squared his shoulders, every muscle trembling with exhaustion, but his gaze unflinching. The crowd thundered with anticipation, thousands of alien voices rising in a frenzy. From the darkness beyond, 3 armored silhouettes emerged, taller and broader than the first soldier, their movements synchronized with the precision of predators. The spectacle had shifted from a duel to an execution, and the audience demanded their retribution. Mason's lungs burned as he inhaled the dry, blood-soaked air. His ribs ached, his vision blurred at the edges, but his mind cut through the haze with crystalline clarity. He had no illusions. These soldiers would not fight for honor or entertainment. They fought to erase the insult he had carved into their pride. Each step they took toward him echoed with the certainty of his death. Yet certainty had been their mistake from the start. The first of the trio lunged, armored fist raised like a hammer. Mason sidestepped, just enough to avoid being crushed, and drove his elbow into the soldier's exposed side. The alien grunted, twisting to retaliate, but Mason ducked low and swept his leg across the weakened joint. Armor buckled, and the giant collapsed onto one knee. Without pause, Mason seized the opportunity, grabbing a loose shard of broken plate from the sand and driving it into the gap at the creature's neck. Black ichor sprayed, coating his hands as the soldier toppled face first. The other two roared in fury, advancing together. Mason backpedaled, heart pounding, dust clinging to the sweat on his skin. One swung high while the other swept low, a coordinated attack meant to overwhelm him. He dove between them, rolling across the ground, sand grinding into his open wounds. Pain flared bright, but he surged to his feet, fists clenched. They turned, flanking him, voices growling in their guttural tongue. The crowd screamed for blood, but Mason barely heard them. His focus narrowed to the rhythm of their movements, the subtle shift of weight in their armored legs. The soldier on his left charged, arms wide to crush him. Mason darted forward instead of back, slipping into the embrace, ramming his shoulder into the alien's chest. The impact rattled his bones, but the alien stumbled, balance lost. Mason struck upward with both fists, hammering beneath the chin, snapping the head back with a crack. As the soldier reeled, Mason snatched a jagged bone fragment from the sand and drove it into the vulnerable joint of the throat. The second alien bellowed and slammed into him, sending Mason sprawling across the arena. He hit hard, grit scraping into his cheek, stars exploding across his vision. He rolled instinctively as the gauntlet fist smashed down where his head had been a moment before. The ground cratered beneath the strike, sand spraying. Mason scrambled upright, chest heaving, ribs screaming. The soldier advanced again, relentless, every blow heavier than the last. Mason weaved through the barrage, each movement slower now, every dodge costing him more strength. Then he saw the opening. The alien strikes, though devastating, grew wild with rage. One swing left its flank exposed for the briefest instant. Mason lunged, driving his fist into the vulnerable joint of the abdomen. The alien staggered, but Mason pressed harder, striking again and again until the armor dented inward. With a roar, he leapt onto the soldier's back, locking his arms around its throat. The alien thrashed violently, spinning, crashing into walls, slamming backward into stone pillars. Each impact crushed Mason's body, but he refused to let go. His vision narrowed, darkness creeping at the edges, until at last the soldier collapsed under his weight. Mason squeezed harder, teeth clenched, until the glowing eyes dimmed to nothing. He rolled free, gasping, chest on fire, every limb trembling from exhaustion. Around him lay 3 alien corpses, their blood pooling into the sand, dark rivers staining the arena floor. The Coliseum had fallen into chaos, voices clashing in disbelief. Some shrieked in anger, others whispered in awe, and a silence hovered over pockets of the crowd as if they could not trust their eyes. But there was no pause. The opposite gate opened again, and more soldiers marched forward, 6 this time, their weapons and fists gleaming beneath the lights. Mason dragged himself upright, every fiber of his body screaming, but his mind steady. 20 minutes, he thought. He would give them 20 minutes they would never forget. The next battle blurred into a storm. Blades flashed, fists cracked against bone, blood sprayed across the sand. Mason fought with the precision of training and the fury of survival, using every scrap of the arena, shards of armor, broken bones, even fistfuls of sand, to strike where his fists alone could not. He twisted between giants, broke joints with leverage, blinded glowing eyes with grit. Every second was agony, every strike a gamble. Yet each enemy fell, one after another, their corpses scattering across the arena like toppled statues. Time dissolved into chaos. Dust hung thick in the air, mingling with the iron tang of blood. Mason's skin was a canvas of bruises, cuts, and burns, but his movements remained steady, driven by a force deeper than strength. He thought of every lesson carved into him in the forests, deserts, and jungles back on Earth. He thought of every brother in arms who had stood against impossible odds. He thought of the promise that humanity would never bow. The crowd's chants grew weaker, fragmented, voices uncertain. The spectacle was no longer entertaining. It was terrifying. A human, small, fragile, mocked, was carving through soldiers bred for war. The arrogance that had filled the Coliseum at the beginning had curdled into dread. At last, silence settled. Mason stood alone in the center of the arena, his chest heaving, his body shaking with fatigue. Around him lay the bodies of those who had mocked him, a field of alien dead strewn across the sand. The air was thick with dust and the stench of blood, the ground painted in crimson and black. He was soaked in sweat, dirt, and gore, but he remained upright. He turned his gaze upward toward the gallery where the commanders watched. His eyes, hollowed by exhaustion yet burning with defiance, locked on theirs. He raised one trembling arm and pointed at them, a gesture that cut deeper than any weapon. His voice, cracked but steady, carried into the stunned silence. 20 minutes ago you laughed. Now none are standing. The words hung heavy, echoing against the Coliseum walls. Not a cheer, not a jeer, only silence followed. The audience had no language for what they had seen. The commanders shifted uneasily, their armor gleaming in the artificial light, their confidence shaken. Mason let his arm fall, shoulders slumping with the weight of exhaustion, but his eyes never wavered. He had survived, and in surviving, he had shattered the illusion of their superiority. Humanity was no longer a curiosity. Humanity was a threat. He spat blood into the sand, clenched his fists one last time, and stood tall amid the carnage. The arena belonged to him now, not as a prize, but as proof. A single soldier had endured, and the galaxy would never laugh again.